The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
Kick off the 2020 NCAAs on Wednesday, March 18th at the Barn at Cowboy Jackson, downtown Minneapolis. Presented by J-Rob Intensive Camps and Track Wrestling, the 7-7 pregame party will feature 7 high-profile guests with connections to the wrestling community, including business people, entertainers, athletes, and coaches. Dan Gable, 1972 Olympic gold medalist, 2-time NCAA champion, and 15-time national champion head coach, is the first booked guest. The full lineup of featured guests will be revealed via J-Rob Intensive Camps and Track Wrestling social media in the coming weeks. Event proceeds will be donated to Take Down Cancer, an initiative of the Randy Shaver Cancer Research and Community Fund. Shane Sparks of Track Wrestling and the Big Ten Network will serve as the event MC. Sparks will interview each of the 7 guests for 7 minutes, the length of the collegiate wrestling match, mirroring the format of Track Wrestling's popular 7 Minutes Q&A series. Come celebrate the sport of wrestling with friends while supporting a great cause. Tickets purchased online include a complimentary drink for those 21 and up. Ticket quantities are limited, so reserve your space now for this exciting kickoff party. And for more information, go to 7in7party.com and get your tickets today. Another episode of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. Today, talking with Chris Ayres, the head wrestling coach at Princeton. The Tigers fresh off a 19-13 victory at Jadwin Gym over the Big Red of Cornell, giving the Tigers the first Ivy League championship since 1986. Coach Ayres, that's got to be cool to hear, to know that the Princeton Tigers are Ivy League wrestling champions.
Yeah, it's an amazing feat. I think that we've been working towards this moment for 14 years, and what people don't realize is just how many people it took to really get the program to this point, whether it be the athletes themselves that got the job done on the mat that night. There was a lot of alumni in the stands that, really have supported us financially, the coaching staff we've assembled, and just everyone that's gone before. There were some tough years there where guys stuck it out and kept this program going when it was really hard to compete week in and week out. So to lead to this point is just really an amazing moment for the program. I think it's just a credit to the power of this place, Princeton, and the people of this place. So I was so happy to be a part of that, and really just happy to get that Ivy League win. Interestingly enough, it was the 500th win Ivy League championship for Princeton. So we have the most by far of any of the other Ivies. So 500, they're trying to figure out if it's the most championships in any league, but there's been realignments and stuff. So they're still working on that, but it's pretty cool. To have Ivy League champions next to our name.
Yeah, it seems like it's a story of perseverance, because you make a point to bring up those first 2 years you were 0-35 in dual meets, and looking at that, some of the teams you lost to those first 2 years, Duquesne, which no longer has a program, East Stroudsburg, which is now Division II, Merchant Marine Academy, which was Division III, Wagner, which no longer has a team, Wilkes, which is Division III, Millersville, which was then Division I, is now Division II, and then you had losses on the other end of current D1s, Davidson and Franklin and Marshall, and schools like Sacred Heart. So just looking at that alone, you're like, man, that's not really a great way to start a coaching resume, is it?
It's interesting. It actually was I guess 2020, you get 2020 hindsight looking back. I think I had to learn how to really coach. And especially I had to learn how to coach in really, really hard times. It's getting this team motivated is pretty easy. I mean, they're trying to win an Ivy League title. They're trying to win the IWA title. We think we can win a trophy at the NCAAs. Well, back in those days, we were, if we won a match in a dual meet the first year, that was pretty good. So you have to really figure out how to motivate people in really trying circumstances. And so I think I gained a lot of experience in keeping those teams going and keeping guys motivated through, almost 6 months. And I think it really helped me develop as a coach, where, I'm not just recruiting really good kids into a room and then, putting them in that room and then they get better. I have to actually learn how to coach and motivate. So it was hard for sure. And I'm really thankful those teams don't get enough credit. I'm really thankful for those kids for literally sticking it out and believing in the vision, because, we had to create a vision of what this program would be, which is what it is right now. And they had to know that whatever they were doing would have an impact later down the road, which is what really kept those teams going, which I'm grateful for.
One of the things about you that have always kind of been in the back of my mind, and it comes from the documentary Veritas, where, you know, they're documenting John Trench's senior year, and there's a conversation you are having there with Trench about the drive, the passion, the desire, and you said you would not be in coaching if you'd have won your senior year. You finished sixth after qualifying 3 different times. How much does that still resonate with you today?
Yeah, I just told that story to Pat Bruckey this morning. He had a tough weekend. We were just having a conversation, and I just said, one of the best things that happened to me was that I think I wish it didn't happen. I wanted to be an NCAA champion, and I worked really hard at it, and I was devastated when I didn't do it. But it actually kept me in wrestling. I think I probably would have went to the business world. But it's funny now. You get to this point where I'm at right now, and it's funny you bring up that conversation. Back then, I felt like I was where I needed to be in that Lehigh program at the time with Trench, and that was a really good group. And now fast forward, you bring up that story. That's amazing you bring up the story. I literally had that. I had a conversation with Pat Bruckey that this is where I'm supposed to be in this room right now. The path wasn't smooth all the time, but we're doing amazing things, and I'm where I want to be. And had I done what I thought I could do in D1 wrestling, if I would have won that championship, I don't think I would have stayed connected. So that's amazing. You brought that up. Literally this morning, I had that conversation. That's crazy.
What's also interesting is there's now that you're getting guys onto the podium, you're getting guys close to those medal rounds and things of that nature. I go back and look at your career. Your freshman year, obviously, it's oddly enough in Minnesota again this year as we look back at your freshman year. But 0-2 that year, you got a loss to Casey Cunningham, who we know what he ended up doing. Then the next year, you beat Cunningham, but you get to the blood round and you wrestle Jason Ramstetter, who's a Granby guy out of California. Go figure. Now the current head coach at Adams State in Division II, and there's the loss in the blood round in sudden victory.
Yeah.
How do you as an athlete at that point recover from that? And how do you as a coach look at that point when you were an athlete and try to make that a teachable moment?
Yeah, I spent a lot of times under the bleachers after that match, to be honest with you. I'd had a rough year that year. Interestingly enough, my freshman year kind of came out of the blocks. No one had heard of me. I hadn't done anything in high school. And I made it to the finals of Easterns, and I had a pretty successful freshman campaign. My sophomore year, I was probably cutting a little bit too much weight, but I really started to put it together at the end of the season, and I think I had the 5th seed first round. I think I might have majored. I'm not sure. And then I had Casey at some point, who was also very good at beating me before. Ramstetter almost teched me during the season. So I'm in this match, and I really wanted that match back. And the crazy lesson about that match, and I'll never forget this, is we were in overtime and he shot. And so I kind of down blocked, but my thumb caught him in the eye socket. And I swear my thumb went so far into his eye, I thought he was going to be majorly hurt. So I backed off. What happened was he kept wrestling. So he kept wrestling, got through the high crotch and actually scored. That's how he won. So my thing there that I kind of teach is you just can't stop for any reason unless the ref stops you. Cause that kind of cost me. I'm not saying I would have won, but I really kind of lost mental focus there for a second, cause I actually had hurt him. The rest of the tournament, his eye was totally closed. But the other thing I think I take from that is, I fought really hard on the backside in that tournament. I think I lost a call-out maybe in the quarters or something like that. I forget what round I lost a call-out, but I had pretty good success on the backside. Something I hadn't done well in my past, and I think that kind of keyed me up for me to do it my senior year.
Yeah, what's interesting is when looking through this and names that pop into your head and names that pop into your bracket, you get to the quarterfinals and wrestle Clint Musser, who was a finalist that year, your senior year, after you picked off Jamie Height from Iowa. Then the blood round comes a guy who had beaten you the year before, Ben Boozer from Edinburgh, unseeded. He had taken Brian Snyder into overtime. He had beaten Kevin Stanley. He's having a good he's having a good tournament, even though he's in the consolations. And what goes through your mind knowing, oh, man, I've been here 3 times. This is my 4th time. I've got a guy who beat me here last year. What's the mental adjustment there? What goes through your mind even, almost 20 years later when you think about that match?
Honestly, I was dying to get that one back. That match at NCAAs the year prior, I think I was actually seated pretty high that year. I might have been 5th or something like that. He upset me. He kind of scouted me well. I tried to hit an inside trip, got caught on my back. This is my junior year. And, I fought back, and literally I really wrestled really hard to try to come back, and I just fell short. So that one was like 365 days. That one was bothering me from the year prior. So I was actually, believe it or not, even though I'd lost to him, I was excited that I had that match. I was going to get that match back, and it was the one that I lost. It was the one that was going to allow me to be an All-American. I felt very confident. I was upset about the previous year. The funny thing is about Ben Boozer is I was tall for the weight. Maybe Casey Cunningham was taller than me. And then Boozer was even a little bit taller than him. So that's a weird thing when you're the tallest guy, usually in the wrestling, Cunningham and I went back and forth as well. But Boozer, but I was, I flipped it. I could have looked at it like, oh, here's this guy I lost to, and he's a tough opponent. He's so damn tall. He scrambles. But I was like, I want this one back. This is my moment. I'm going to get it. So ended up great. I wrestled a solid match. I think I pretty well controlled the bout. But he was a tough competitor. It's a weird thing, too, when you battle with people multiple times and, when the dust settles, that was a tough match. I would have liked to see that kid be an All-American, too. And it was like hard to see him lose, to know that we've been battling through those things. But I was not going to be denied in that moment. I just felt like I had to get it done.
And circling back to what it takes to be a coach, and that lesson, like you talked to Pat Bruckey this morning about, what it drives you. When you look back at your career and now you can almost empathize with some of these athletes. Now that you've got athletes that are in that position, what's been the biggest change from how you talk to those athletes that are going through that type of pain from one year to the next?
So that conversation happens more than the other conversation of like a guy being successful. Coach Strobel used to say there's only 10 guys that are really happy at the NCAA tournament. So I think there's always wiggle room. I think if a guy has, time left on his clock, it's always just back to the drawing board. What could we have done differently? I'm also, I think as a staff, we're very good about, I think each kid's got a different button. And I don't think they call it jumps or make jumping levels or getting to a next level. It's not like a steady incline of growth. You have these moments, these aha moments where you make big jumps, in my mind, from what I've seen with my wrestlers. So in losses and when people are down, I think it's an opportunity to sit with them and sort of dig around a little bit to why maybe they didn't perform to the level that they thought they could be. And it's an opportunity to have them kind of search themselves a little bit and try to figure out that little thing that might make a big difference down the road. Because when you get to this level, the differences are so small. As a coach, you see them. And quite frankly, most of it's mental. Most of these guys, when you're down to 70 Division I guys, these are the best of the best. They were the best in high school. So it's a matter of getting them to that next level. And that's what I think those opportunities will provide. Those moments when you're down actually can be moments where you climb back out and get better.
How many years did it take you to feel like this team had made those type of changes? I'm looking at 2011-12 is the year when we joked. It's like, yeah, hey, I finally, you and Sean Gray joke, you finally beat Steve Martin. Here we are, 2020, you finally beat Rob Cole. So is that kind of the range where you feel like you guys made that turn towards that upward mobility, so to speak?
The funny thing is the program has been steady, but, these guys, I joke about these jumping levels for individuals of these big jumps. I think ours has always been steady, and it's just one good thing about the program, I'll say, is when we hit a milestone, we haven't really looked back. We had one off year where we sat a few of our better guys. It wasn't a great year. We kind of took a step backwards that year. I can't remember what year. They're all blurry now. But other than that, we kind of continually moved forward. And every year we kind of did more things the first EIWA champ under, since I've been here. And then you get the first All-American, first multiple All-Americans, first Midlands winner. And sort of the team, once you do those things, they sort of think anything less is sort of a failure, which is funny when you're trying to get them. It seems like these big goals that are so hard to get because no one's gotten it before, like a Midlands champ. We never had one. And then you do it, and we had 2 guys do it, and it's sort of like, okay, this is what we do now. And then it's not such a big deal anymore. But so it's like just taking those steps is important, just to know what we're doing. It's evidence that what we're doing is working, and it's evidence that we can be better and we can kind of achieve the vision we set out for the program. And so that's kind of where I look to, like, when, you beat a better program than you historically had never beaten before. It's just another step towards being one of the best programs in the country, which is funny. As you look around, we're ranked 5th in most polls right now, which is pretty crazy. It's a little surreal for me just because of where we've been. But it feels right too at the same time. Like, hey, yeah, that's where we should be. So it's a really exciting time right now. That's with the win against Cornell and then where we're headed. It's just an amazing period in Princeton wrestling history.
Yeah, speaking of rankings, school was ranked for the first time in the coaches poll, which goes back to the 60s in 2016. Since then, you guys have been a regular team that have been sitting in the top 25, peaked at number 12, the highest dual meet ranking in school history earlier this season, coming in this week as we record this, number 14 after the win over Cornell. But when you see a number 5 in a tournament point ranking, now that you brought Matt Kolodzik back into the program after he was sitting out for the Olympic year 2020, one, what were the factors that led to Matt coming back, and how much of the trophy was in his decision to come back?
It was an interesting process. First and foremost, we wouldn't have approached Matthew if Mike D'Angelo hadn't, he had a little bit of an injury issue, and he just kept having problems out there, and he wasn't competing to a level that I would say he felt good with. And he was getting frustrated against NC State. He had the injury default. Injury got more serious. And so then some conversations were had. I pulled Matthew in, and really it was up to him. And if either party did not want to, if Mike D'Angelo said, I think I can make it back and I think I can be an All-American, if he had said that to me, I would have said, okay, that's it. We're not talking to Matthew. If I went to Matthew and I said, hey, you have these 2 options. You can stay the course you're on now, or, there's this opportunity, possibly you can come out. And he hadn't made the Olympic trials either. So I think it was ringing around in his head a little bit, just watching a lot of guys that he had beaten. If it hadn't worked for him, where he wasn't like, he basically was like, I'm ready now. We wouldn't have pulled him. But the real reason that, well, we didn't pull him, he pulled himself, I guess is the way you want to put it, because we needed everybody in line. But, the real reason, I think, is, obviously this helped the Cornell duel, but he can win a national title right now. That'll help our team a lot, too, in terms of getting a trophy, possibly. So that was really the driving force behind him and us, is more that we think he can be a national champ now. And so it was a lot of conversations, but happened relatively quickly, just because I think, after a few days of talking with Mike D'Angelo and then, talk with Matthew, it just seemed like the right thing to do. And so that's how we ended at this point right now. It's just Matthew's trying to win a national title. Mike D'Angelo wants the best for what's the best for the team. And so it worked out pretty nicely, to be honest with you.
We look at the scenario, because a lot of the times with the rules the way they are, or at least they've changed over the years. How does Kolodzik work with this academically? Because in the past, you had to sit out completely for an Olympic red shirt, and now they've kind of relaxed that, I believe. And what was it like for Kolodzik's course load and things of that nature, and to be eligible to compete second semester?
So the rule is at Princeton that you have to finish in 8 semesters. So whether you take an Olympic year or whether you take an Olympic year competing, or you take what they call a gray shirt, you take a year off here, you can't be in school. So his original plan was to be out both semesters, fall and spring. And then, he'd come back next fall and finish out his senior year, full year next year. So he was out the fall term. A little bit, he'd been kind of saying, like, it was a little bit of a school decision too. He he's kind of like not lost, but he was out of the loop a little bit he's an engineering student. He's very much into school. So that was a little bit of the thing too. So what happens is he just re-enrolls in school in the spring semester. So he'll finish next fall with no eligibility left, obviously, but he'll finish school. So that's the way it works here. There's no ninth semester. You finish in 4 years, whether you take a year off in between or a semester off somewhere in between. You're going to finish in 8 semesters. So he was on track to do that. So there's no real rule in the Ivy that you can be in class and be on any sort of redshirt, Olympic or otherwise. You have to sort of be out of school.
Now, when it comes to back to Mike D'Angelo a bit, making the move down to 149 after Quincy Monday is obviously got a pretty good spot there at 157, Mike coming off of the year where he sat out of school. And when you look at what this team can become with the trophy points potentially looming there with everything going right, what's a guy like Mike D'Angelo actually mean to the program?
He's huge. I mean, we have this wheelbarrow. I'm sure you've probably seen it, but it's like we bring it everywhere with us. There's a lot of symbolism with it. But there's only one name on that wheelbarrow, and it's Mike D'Angelo. So his name is all airbrushed in it because he's all about this team. I think what he represents is you better be grateful. You better be grateful because you can do everything right and bad things can happen to you and you cannot be out there. So Mike is with us everywhere just so the guys can look at him and say, that could be me. I'm sure Mike would be killing to be out here right now. I better make the most of it. And so when we have Mike at our meets, for me personally too, I want to do more just because I know he can't. And I fortunately never had to deal with something like he's dealing with, but man, this is where the leadership comes through with Mike D'Angelo. I mean, he is all about this team. There was not one person more happy on Sunday, and you could look at the pictures, than Mike D'Angelo. And so he's our leader. And bad things happen, but he's remained positive. And I think he's the model of like, hey, you may not have this shot all the time, so you better make the most of it.
We mentioned Quincy Monday a moment ago, but that's probably got to be an intimidating living room to go in. Talk a little bit about what was like recruiting Quincy Monday to Princeton.
Actually, they were great. Joe actually recruited Quincy the most. So it's a pretty funny story. We thought we weren't going to get him the whole time. So obviously his dad's at UNC, but we did the whole recruiting process. Like we dotted our I's, crossed our T's, but we really just thought like, this would be cool if Quincy came, Kenny Monday's son, but I don't think he's going to go. So we go through the whole process. He comes on. This is a true story conversation that we had in the office. It was, I said, hey, Joe, why don't you call Quincy, see if he wants to come? I said, I don't think he does. I think he's just going to go to North Carolina, but let's ask. And so Joe called him and said, hey, you want to come? And he goes, hey, let me think about it. Then he got back to us. He's like, yeah, I think I want to come to Princeton. So that's pretty much how it went down. Like, probably this recruit where we were like, there's no way we're getting this kid. And that turns out he comes. So it was pretty cool recruiting Quincy. It was awesome.
It's one of those situations where you clearly now know that father figure there, that when he makes a call to you about wrestling technique, you might actually pay a little bit of attention to what he's got to say.
Yeah. It's so surreal too, because I gave a speech when we first tried to start getting this RTC going. I gave a speech and I showed his video. This is 6 years ago. And I said, hey, this was a moment that changed my life in wrestling. This is a true story. So I was in 8th grade, and I remember watching Kenny win the Olympics. And in those days, you had to stay up. Like, it just said, there'd be like a 4-hour block on NBC, and it'd say, swimming, fencing, and wrestling. And you didn't know when the wrestling would be on. So I remember waiting, and it'd be basketball or something else. And then finally, Kenny Monday's Olympic gold medal match came on, and he won. And I remember thinking, that's what I want to do right there. I remember him running around the gym. True story. So I used that video in explaining, like, this was my moment. And it was for the RTC, and it was like freestyle wrestling. I wanted to win an Olympic gold medal. It's just so surreal that, 6 or so years later, 5 or 6 years later, we're recruiting his son. His dad is at all our matches now. It's so cool, man. It's so cool.
when we look at the dynamic of your coaching staff, I mean, you've got that time in the Lehigh Valley, even though you've got those Jersey roots to you as well, but you've also got a very distinctly Jersey staff with Joe Dubuque and Sean Gray, and then Nate Jackson and his pack of kids that he brought out from the Midwest. I mean, so explain the dynamic of your coaching staff and how all that Jersey and hair product works together.
I'll tell you what. So even if they're not from Jersey, they turn into Jersey really quick. I mean, we're talking. There's a lot of guys around our program now when you consider the RTC too. So this cast of characters we have is incredible. We're talking Reese Humphrey. We're talking Bunky, Pat Dowdy. We had Boris Novachka here for 4 months. Now we got Bryce Meredith, CJ Brocky. They all turn into Jersey so quickly. You only understand Jersey if you're, and you know this a little bit. You only understand Jersey if you're in it, and you only love it if you're in it, So what happens is they just love being here. So it's pretty cool. There's a lot of hair product in the locker room, definitely. Definitely a lot of Jersey attitude around here, but it's good. We love it.
One thing it's been cool to see is not just Princeton, but your neighbors around there. Rutgers and Rider. Rider's had a pretty good tradition there, and now John Hanchey lead the way after Gary Taylor had spent an eternity there. And for years, Rider was kind of leading the charge in Division I amongst the programs there in New Jersey. With Rutgers and Princeton amping up their game, what's it mean to have 3 really strong Division I programs in the state, in addition to the very strong Division III school down at TC&J?
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a wrestling community. I mean, TC&J and Rider are literally 12 minutes from Princeton. Then Rutgers is about 30 minutes. I mean, that's a crazy little quadrant of wrestling. It's a hotbed. I mean, we have, lots of All-Americans, lots of national champions. TC&J is one of the best Division III schools. The RTC room is too packed because there's just so many guys, because we let anyone come that meets the qualifications, and there just happens to be a lot of schools around that do meet that have kids that meet the qualifications. So it's just a great wrestling environment, and because we've elevated our game, because Rutgers is elevated, every team is getting a lot better, and the expectation just gets higher and higher. Like I said earlier, for us, we do something we don't look back. I think Rutgers is similar in that, they're doing some special things too. And then Rider has historically been probably the better team, individually at least, for a lot of years. And so they're really good too. So it's a pretty neat thing to see Jersey wrestling as good as you know, it's one of the best states in the country. So it's good to have results that mirror who we are as a wrestling state.
When it comes to making this run at a trophy, and with the way college wrestling is scored, there's still going to be that argument between duels and tournaments. People are going to have that until something gets figured out. But looking at the numbers and how they work out and who's got to do what, I think on paper people are looking at Glory, Kolodzik, Monday, and Brucky as your core 4 to try to place and get big points. How much 100%. Is it going to take guys like Ty Gacy and Grant Cuomo and Kevin Parker and Travis Stefanik and then the rest of the guys outside of those 4 to really, what are you looking for from them and how likely is it for them to succeed and push through maybe a 5th guy on the podium? Because it's once you get 1, that's the hardest one. Then it's hard to get 2, and then getting multiples. That's when you're a program. But explain the mindset on what you hope to achieve come U.S. Bank Stadium in March.
So the first team meeting we had at the beginning of the year, I just think I put a number 5 on the whiteboard. I said, anyone know what this is? And they're like, I don't know. I was like, well, typically to place top 4. No, I put 4 equals 5 or 5 equals 4. And so I said, you know what this means? And they're like, I don't know. I said, well, if we get 5 All-Americans, we should place in the top 4, which will earn us a trophy, which is typically, if you look back, that's about the math of it. And you need a high guy in there too, or high guys get more points, as you know. So if you get national champs, you could do it with less. So right now, I think 4 is what we have on paper. I really think we have some spots where we want those guys to make those jumps, and we've been trying to push those buttons. Really phenomenal job against Cornell, 65 and 74. Did solid jobs. Best 7 minutes I've seen out of both of them in terms of sticking to game plans and focus. Really loved where Grant Cuomo was that match. Wrestled a great match, very aggressive. Also really liked Kevin Parker. He's starting to, I think, start to feel a little bit more comfortable. He's given up a lot of penalty points. It's really weird, which is sort of a sign of like, he gave up caution points and just weird stalling points. Like, I think that's a sign of not focusing in your match. But he was really solid in this match. And we need guys like that. Stefanik beating low in that situation was huge too. I think we have the rest of the guys really have a shot to do it. We just need someone to make a big jump. And that's our fifth, I think, if everything goes well, as you know. But we have the potential. I mean, I think there's 7 guys on this team to be All-Americans now. But will that happen? Who knows? Some guys have to make a bit of a jump, but that's what it takes. Takes 5 to get to top 4, really, and we need one more guy to bust through, basically.
And with Kolodzic, with the is there too much being made out of the 4-2 win over Hunter Richard, or is it just a little Matt Rust, or is it just slow and steady wins a race?
I mean, if you saw the match, it was just interesting. He just if there was someone judging the match, he dominated. He was close to getting 2 turns. First period, he dominated. He was probably in 6 or 7 other times, pretty deep, but just didn't finish. And then he got to a point where his most critical mistake is he went to hang on mode. He went to, I've tried all these things and I've been close, but it's like, I could just hang on right here. And so that's where he started to go wrong, had a stall call out of bounds. I'm not worried. I told Matthew, I said, this really isn't your best venue anyway, dual meets. He's lost some bad dual meets. But when it gets to the end of the year, he's in that tournament, he's pretty damn solid. And I'll put my money on him when we get to that last tournament of the year.
Are you excited about Minnesota and the opportunity to put a record crowd into a football stadium?
I don't know, to be honest with you, part of me is, you talked about the dual meet thing. I'm a bit traditionalist, but I'm not. I like new things. As you can see with our program, we're pretty innovative with how we do promotions and the stuff we're doing with our team. But I just, I'm having a hard time envisioning it being very intimate, like the usual NCAAs. But to get a record crowd and to fill, I guess they're going to do the lower bowl is what I understand. I haven't looked into it that much, to be honest with you. I guess that could be pretty sweet. What do you think? Do you know the arena at all?
I haven't been in there yet because I'm not a Vikings fan, and all the cool concerts I've been out of the country for. So sorry, I was out of the country when Metallica came through a couple years ago when they opened it up, and so although I might actually be out of the country when Rage Against the Machine comes through at the Target Center later this year.
Oh my God!
I am not happy about that.
You're missing some good ones.
Yeah, well, I saw him in '90. I saw him in '97, so that's not an issue. But I actually saw both those bands in '97.
Would you see him Lollapalooza?
No, I saw Rage with Wu-Tang at Merriweather Post Pavilion outside of D.C. August of '97. Then I saw Metallica March of '97, my senior year in high school. So,
yeah, I didn't see Metallica, but I saw Rage. I just don't remember when. I'm not that good at keeping track, so that's good.
But back to what I was saying, as far as I've not been in the facility yet, but it is giant. I know that. They're talking in upwards of 40,000. And where I'm sitting from is, okay, it may be an inconvenience to some of the lifers a little bit, but those people didn't become lifers unless they didn't go for the first time. The opportunity for single session tickets to be like $20 in some places to go to the national championships, bring your kid to the match and make them fans that'll be going for the next 50 years. I think opening the door to a younger crowd and giving them a point of entry. Because right now, if you're a college kid, who's got $1,000 of disposable income to go to the NCAA championships if they can even get a ticket? So that's where I'm more happy about is it's, there's a lot of stuff to do down here. Having lived here for the last 10 years, it's like, it's a great spot. There's snow on the ground right now. It's a little chilly, but it's February. That's still a month away. So I'm hopeful. Yeah. And plus, I want to see how awesome the sound system is, because that's a little bit of me curious on how I'm going to sound in there too. But I'm excited for
cool.
it. I'm excited for it. But now, last two things I am too. Last two things I want to touch on. One, you've been kind of championing girls wrestling in New Jersey. Of course, your daughter's been very successful following Dad's lead there. But you also have a female on the roster. Explain Demetra Yankopoulos to us.
So it's an interesting story. So Demetra, I wanted to include girls. Obviously, I've been pretty involved, especially since my daughter started to get serious. I started to get more interested in women's wrestling. And then, I just realized how good it is for women and how good it is for our sport. So now I want to kind of get some things happening here at Princeton. Demetra kind of falls on our doorstep a little bit in that she's pretty damn good. Plays in Fargo. She's tough. She can wrestle. So what I was doing through her first year, her freshman year, is I'd have her in the RTC, not really thinking to put her on my roster. And she was in the RTC, and I think she trained 3 times a week. My daughter would get there with her a little bit too, and it worked out pretty good. Then this year, what happened was Chloe got hurt. So Chloe got hurt, and we were starting to run it. That's my daughter. We were starting to go into practice mode, and I was like, you know what? This girl really loves wrestling. And I just said to her, hey, do you want to be on the team, like legitimately? Because she was saying, how do I lift? I want to lift too. I want to get more serious. I said, I'm just going to put you on my roster. Interestingly enough, we have had a few women on our roster in the past. We actually had a woman wrestle in the early 2000s.
Yeah, Audrey
I wasn't
Pang,
the coach
right?
then. That's correct. Yep, Audrey Pang. She was here this weekend. So there was actually precedent for it. So we went to the administration. I said, hey, we have precedent for this. We'd like to add Demetra to our roster. And they were super cool too. They were like, obviously, they're also like, there's also precedent with the girls basketball team. They have men on their roster because they have like a practice squad they practice against. And so I was like, oh, that's cool. So basically that's how she's ended up on the roster. And what the neatest thing about it was, I said, hey, if you're on our roster, right, like you got to do everything that these guys are doing. And she's like, that's what I want. That's what I want. And she's been amazing. So she's a little smaller than our guys. So, she'd probably be like a 110-ish pounder. And so generally our guys will spar with her when we're going live, and she's gotten damn good too. So she'll compete in Texas. We'll take her out to Texas for that nationals. And the weird thing is just trying to figure out the competitive schedule for her. I got to spend a little bit more time on that and figure out some events I can get her to, because she's probably getting a little tired of just practicing because she hasn't competed in a while. So it's been amazing. It's been good for the guys too to have her on the team. It's women's wrestling is so important. I realized this in the last few years to the health of the sport. You add one girl to the sport, you add 2 parents, you add 4 grandparents, you add brothers, sisters. It's like why have we left out the other half of humanity from this sport when they could be getting so much out of it? So we're at a turning point here, and I think it's pretty awesome. And I think Princeton, our program's sort of at the forefront of trying to make opportunities for women in wrestling in D1.
One thing I've always been kind of enamored with is how mentors work in this sport. And so many times people look at whoever's the boss has got to be the mentor. You're the boss at Princeton. What people do you still look up to as mentors in your career?
Do I look up to?
Yes.
Yeah, Greg Strobel. He was an amazing mentor. My coach, and then I worked with him for about 6 years. I still talk to him about wrestling. We're very close. Pat Santoro, obviously, he coached me. We coached together at Lehigh. Huge mentor for me. I looked at him a lot. We kind of lean on each other a little bit. And that's probably it in terms of like wrestling coaches. I read a lot. I think running a wrestling team is sort of like running a business. Organizational leadership is the same, whether you're running a team or you're running a business or you're running, a doctor's office. I think there's key components there that you have to have to be successful. And so I kind of am always looking for the keys to that. And so I'm a lifelong learner. I always think I'm trying to get better. I always think there's room to improve in this craft. And so it's been fun. The other mentors I have are my coaches. I'm very fortunate to have, seasoned coaches in Sean Gray and Joe Dubuque. Either coach should be a head coach somewhere else. They're associate head coaches here for a reason, and that's just not a title. If you see our interviews and stuff, there'll be interviews with Sean, there'll be interviews with Joe. It's not like I view myself as the higher leader. I kind of think of us as equals, and I learn a lot from those guys. And I think we we mesh well. We'll tell each other what we think, whether we think it's going to maybe piss off one of us. But it's what's great about what we do is that they have opinions. They're great coaches, and by the end of it, once we decide something, we're all behind it. And so those guys are great mentors too. So that's kind of the people I look to in my life for leadership.
Lastly, I'm going to circle it back to Veritas a bit, because during this time, I discovered the amazing person that was Donna Strobel. And when my time in Pennsylvania was there, and I got to see her and Greg at Gary Abbott's wedding, and I got to be friends with them over the years. And we recently lost Donna. And what did she mean, not just to the Lehigh program, but to just to wrestling people in general?
Yeah. So I was at the funeral, and, the family members spoke first, and then they said, if anyone else would like to say any words about Donna, please come up. And I literally sprinted up there. And this is what was pretty neat. Both her daughters and her husband, in her last days, she said, I want my boys to be there. I want my boys to be there. And we called her Mrs. Coach. And so, a lot of those guys from my era were there at the funeral. And I got up there, and the first thing I said is, I want to just give you perspective of what it was like to be one of Mrs. Coach's boys. The other reason I'm up here is if I didn't come up here, she'd be really pissed at me. And she was literally Mrs. Coach. There wasn't Greg without Donna in terms of our program. And I told the story that, I wasn't used to Mercedes Benzes and Land Rovers, and that's not where I came from. I had a very blue collar background. And then you go to Lehigh private school, and that's what I was like thrown into. So I kind of felt like I landed on Mars, basically. So I was really lost my first year at Lehigh. Greg wasn't there yet. Coach Latessa was. He was amazing too. I joke that he tutored me in calc. Like, he was trying to do everything he could to help me get through, because I was not making it. I was drowning pretty quickly. But what happened was, in the second year, Donna came, and she's what I needed. I kind of spoke to the fact that, I needed sort of a mother figure there a little bit more, and I needed more of a family atmosphere. So Greg and Donna would open their house up to me and everyone. And it really was it's so cliche for athletic programs to say hey, it's a family, we're a family. Every athletic program says that. But really with the Lehigh program, with Donna and Greg, it really was a real family. And so that's what she provided. She was she's the thing that she would think of things to do that, we'd never would have thought to do as coaches, just really nice touches that we really enjoyed. She'd make these muffins for us when we got on the bus, and she was on every trip. And, I had my wool hat on the podium one time, a nice winter hat. She never did that again, because she yelled at me for having a hat on the podium. But she was really a team mom, but there for you, team mom. And like I said, at her funeral, it was incredible. So many guys were so many guys were there who were her boys. I mean, literally, she lived for the wrestling program and the wrestling team. And it was such a blessing to have her in my life. Interestingly enough, I in the last two duels, especially the Cornell duel, I had her little obituary card facing out so she could see the match. And I showed that to Greg. I was really close with her. It was a hard loss for the wrestling community, for sure.
Yeah, I didn't know her as close as you guys did, but that was one of those things that just, it hurts your heart when somebody like that leaves us. But in terms of how they've shaped us throughout at our lives, that's what we remember, and that's a pretty cool story, man.
And the interesting, I would not be where I am now without Donna Strobel, and that's the main point I wanted to get across. I kind of joked. Well, I said, my first year, I didn't, I was lost. And then Greg and Donna came, and then I said, wait, no, it was more like Donna and Greg came. So, she was a force, man. And there was no Greg without Donna. And it was a hard loss for all of us, definitely, especially Greg too. They were incredibly close.
Now, the next steps for Princeton wrestling as we talk back about the rest of the season. We've got the Easterns coming up. We've got What are the goals now with the last month of the season to go? What's the training like? What are the goals? What's the mindset here?
Yeah, so it was interesting. Last year we come out of finals at a weird time. So about 2.5 weeks ago, we got out of finals, and then we go right into our Ivy League schedule. So what we do in the past is we had a really hard training phase right out of that first week into Harvard and Brown, and then a pretty hard training phase going into Cornell. That hasn't worked out for us in the last season, so we kind of changed it up a little bit to be a little bit less training intensive before the Cornell deal. So now we're going to pick up a little bit of training. We have three tough weeks here of training. We got Penn and Drexel coming in this weekend, and then obviously we have Rutgers next weekend, which is going to be a huge dual meet in Jadwin. I mean, really just the battle for New Jersey bragging rights. And then we have a weekend off, and then we're into EIWA. So generally speaking, in the past, we've sort of built momentum in the second half. Some guys maybe took some losses in the early parts of February, and then they generally come out at the end, and we wrestle pretty tough through, the EIWAs and NCAAs. So there's not going to be too many changes to the training plan. We've made some minor adjustments, but the thing for us is we want to do first. So, I mean, we want to win the EIWAs. We want to be top 4 in the country, and that's the goals. And so we'll keep pushing buttons on our guys, and we'll keep training them and trying to get them to that next level. If we get a few more guys to make a jump, we're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Clothing. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. Hey, you know what? Did you like the show? You want to hit that subscribe button? MattTalkOnline.com/listen. Various different ways to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcatcher of choice. And if you're already subscribed, you already listened, you love the show, and you want to support this show and this network, MattTalkOnline.com/join the team. Become a team member today.